it's important to work with great attorneys to get results for our customers and for ourselves to get paid and get the results we want. And there's certain rules that are different by state to state. I'm in California, probably one of the strictest. Other states aren't quite as strict, and yet there's certain common principles across the country. So I'm excited to have somebody who I met a little while ago, David Ceruolo, who is an attorney, Ceruolo & Associates, attorneys at law in Melrose, Massachusetts. You'll tell as soon as he says hello, he's not from Los Angeles as a native. David, thank you. Welcome to Probate Weekly. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me. Hi, guys.
So let's just kind of take a global thing. How did you get into probate law of all the areas to practice? What was it about probate that attracted you as a business person?
Well, I started off initially as a real estate conveyancer. I did residential and commercial transactions, but as I was going on in my practice, I had older clients that came in and they needed estate plans. So I started doing estate planning, and the attorney that I was working for at the time when I just got out of law school was an accountant as well as an attorney. So as time went on, I got a tax spin on things. And so I do the estate plan, and then ultimately, the folks would pass away and the family would come to me to do probate. And so I started doing probate in that way. And then on another scale, or another side of it, there were those clients that were still alive and still, they may have been suffering from dementia at the time. And so with that, I got into doing, guardianships and conservationships. So I've been doing that stuff for a long time now.
Well, not that long. You don't have any gray hair, so
I hide it well.
So just a couple quick terminology. When you say you were an attorney doing real estate, here in California, we would think of that as an escrow officer, right? Where you were just doing transactions of real estate, getting the money from, I guess, a title company, loans and the grant deeds and handling the documents and clearing the contracts and recording everything. So that's what that means. And then when you say guardianships and conservatorships, the terms are the same in California. Give me a quick definition of a guardianship and a quick definition of a conservatorship.
Well, it's simply, when you file for a guardianship over an individual, you're looking to take care of the person of the individual. That be their daily care. It could be their medical care. It could be their daily activities. When you're talking about a conservatorship, now you're looking to take care of the assets in an estate. And in Massachusetts, with the introduction of the probate code here, once upon a time, before the introduction of the probate code, it was about 15 years ago, you'd file one action as a guardianship, and that would be it would entitle the petitioner to go ahead and handle the estate, the assets of the individual. Now, with the introduction of the probate code, there are two separate petitions, two separate filings, and if it's for the same person, then they say they sister them, so that when you appear in court for one, you're appearing in court for the other as well, both actions at the same time.
So in you're unique in a sense in that you're not just an attorney who happens to know something about real estate and does probate and guardianships and conservatorships. We really kind of came from the real estate transaction piece, which normally tells me you kind of have and talking to you, you have a real estate type of tempo to your business, right?
Foundation, right? Yes.
Do you see that distinction with other attorneys and that being part of your advantage?
I don't see that distinction with a lot of attorneys. A lot of attorneys in Massachusetts either will handle real estate or they'll handle probate and estate planning. Right. So yes, it is an advantage here. Absolutely.
I think it's a big one. Those who are just joining in, Probate Weekly, this is our call. We get together every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's a live Zoom call. You're welcome to register and join in at probateweekly.com. And if you're watching on the live stream on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to put questions, comments there. We'll answer them if they're live. And then if they're after the fact, I'll get to them as well or relate to David. Also, love to have you put if you're on the Zoom call or on the social medias, feel free to network, put in your name, contact information. If there's something you're looking for, put that in there. If there's something you offer that's unique, put that in there as well. We're not selling anything here today other than ourselves, so feel free to network yourself and participate. So David, give me a little background on your business. I think real estate agents imagine that attorneys are kind of like king sitting on a throne and just handing out real estate listings all day long. And they have agents come up to him and beg him for listings, and you just hand them out like they're candy, like Santa Claus on a sleigh in the parade. Is that what it's like, or is your business getting referrals as much from real estate agents as it is giving referrals out?
It's getting and giving. It is like that. I do have a host of other offices that I deal with typically on a monthly basis. So I'll be getting work from real estate office, from banks. It's not the same as other states, because in Massachusetts, they still consider real estate closings and transactions as the practice of law. So there aren't any title companies in Massachusetts. So whenever there's a transaction that happens, there is an attorney that needs to be involved in completing the transaction. So I'll get a lot of business from banks, from real estate offices, and then from my social media, which I do have a YouTube channel as well too. I can put some links up for everybody to see. From social media and from advertising, I do get the client, and I do primarily focus on the client when I'm advertising.
That's how I found you, as I saw your YouTube, and I thought, number one, it's informative, number two, easy to talk to, and people enjoy talking to you. Give me a little background, because most attorneys don't do social media that way, or don't do YouTube, but you do. What was it like to get started, and how's that helping you with your business today?
So to get started on social media was, it's still a learning process. I think I'm still just scratching the surface with it. There's a lot to do. It takes a lot of time. But I did have a good friend of mine that was a computer geek, and started getting into video. And when he started getting into video, I got a lot of tips from him. And to this day, we still sit and talk about things that he's doing. And so that got me started. So like any other channel, the first few videos I did, I really didn't know what I was doing, and I still struggle with it. But for the most part, I've got a method to the madness now, where I can edit easy, and as far as tagging and I use things like TubeBuddy, things that I learned along the way. So with tagging and titling the videos, so it's a process. It's a long process. You just gotta pick away at it. I pick away at it every day.
I think that's the right way to look at it. That you better enjoy the process as well, because it's a long haul. It's a lot of details. But if you do, it's like a game. It's like a video game you're playing, but you win in your case with legal fees, and I win with real estate sales, and that's kind of how I approach the same thing. You do real well, and you're obviously very comfortable on camera. Is that something that developed over time, or were you always a speaker and comfortable speaking in front of people?
So when I was in college and law school, I worked for a corporation as a corporate trainer. So that kind of got me started. And the first time that I got in front of a camera, I just froze. But then after that, I started to get more comfortable with it. And then as time went on, I was training classes. They were videoing me. And now I teach at a local college as well, too. I teach real estate to real estate agents coming out into the market. So constantly up in front of people. I'm in court. So presentation skills certainly help.
I think so. I think most attorneys are by their nature pretty good presenters, and that should translate well into video. I think the first couple are always going to be bad until you figure out a few basics. And I try to encourage attorneys I work with, let me interview you a couple of times and we'll get you comfortable, and then you can do it on your own after that. So you teach real estate to real estate agents. Is that like a licensing or pre-licensing course that you teach at a community college?
Yes, in Massachusetts, before you're able to be involved in transactions with real estate, you have to be licensed as a salesperson first, and then the broker. I'm not sure what the process is out in California, but yeah, you have to go through a 40-hour course. And so I teach that 40-hour course. It's once every semester. But I've actually gotten that course online now. I've gotten to a point where I've got it up on a platform called Moodle, and I teach the course there.
Nice.
So it works pretty well. It's convenient for people, and we have a live session, and then I do have actually a playlist on my YouTube channel where I've embedded those videos onto the Moodle platform in my class, and I tell my classes you got to watch it. So it's kind of beneficial all the way around.
Sure, makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about teaching real estate agents, a number of agents on this call are interested in building their business, particularly in the probate space. If you were to coach or counsel a real estate agent who wanted to get more business, and one way they wanted to get it was in the probate space, how would you advise them or counsel them to get started in the process?
So as far as a real estate agent?
Specifically in the probate niche. If a real estate agent, let's say they're selling houses, they want to do
To
more,
get started
and
in
they
the
think of
probate
probate
niche.
as an area that comes up and might be a ripe opportunity for them, what would you recommend them to do in order to get more business in the probate niche in particular?
So as far as, first of all, it's knowledge, right? Knowledge is power in the industry. So the more you can learn about the probate process, the better off you're going to be. And then at that point, you can basically approach probate attorneys that you know may handle it, that you may be friendly with, that you know of. Maybe someone knows an attorney and they can refer them to you. And that way you can market the attorney in order to work with them, in essence. That would be a good referral stream, is to work with another good source would be a divorce attorney. Divorce attorneys are a good stream of probate work. Because a lot of times they'll know other probate attorneys, and then they'll be involved with folks getting divorced on that. And that's on the family law side, right? But it's still a good source of a stream of real estate, because people getting divorced, they have to sell a house. So in that way, you can try to build a practice, a network, if you will, between a probate attorney and a family law attorney.
The largest group of real estate agents on this call are California, because that's where I'm from and my reputation is biggest. 95% of questions I get on probate are covered in our state-specific forms that the agents have never read. So in California, you have a purchase agreement and then a probate addendum that's a couple pages, and then a probate advisory you would attach. On a listing, there's a one-page simple probate listing addendum, and then the probate advisory you would attach as well. What's amazing to me is that agents never read the forms. And you said knowledge is power. And I thought, well, I was going to ask you some questions on the process of probate in Massachusetts, but really your website has a nice high level overview and then product specific on probate and some other things. Do you ever end up teaching specifically probate processes? Is that something that you've done in real estate offices or associations ever invite you to do that? Or how would you go about, advising a real estate agent to learn the process?
Well, I have done seminars. Seminars is my accent. Seminars in real estate offices, and question and answer sessions in real estate offices to try and educate. So that's one way. To get educated in this, in the whole process itself, it can be complicated. So you can certainly try to do reading. What I would suggest is if you go online and try to get outlines of the process itself, that's a good way. When we were in law school, we used outlines a lot to put a lot of information into our heads. So if you can go online and actually Google and find some outlines on the California probate process or whatever state you're in, that's a good way to start. Yeah. And from there, you can, if you have questions on terminology that's there, what's wonderful is once upon a time when I started practicing, we didn't have the internet. Now you got Google. You can go ahead and start Googling some of the terms that you don't understand. And what you're going to look for is information that's going to be broken down into common language, right? Because there's a lot of legalese, as we say, out there to explain what the probate process is about. And as I usually say, and I say to my classes, if I can't break this down so you can understand what I'm talking about, then I don't understand it myself. And so what you're going to look to do is for sources, for outlines that break the language down in a more simplistic language. And that was kind of the other reason for my YouTube channel that I created, because as I talked with clients and people out there, there was a great misunderstanding as to what happened with the probate process and what a will actually does. And so that gave me the idea to say, well, why don't I just give some simple information out in basic terms that folks can understand, so that they can start to understand the process. So I'm not sure in California if they've adopted the probate code, but on my channel, there are quite a few, I have playlists on there. There are quite a few videos up that talk about probate terminology, and I break it down because as far as the resources out there, it's tough to find. But I would say the first step for whatever state you're in is to try to find an outline as to the process itself. When someone passes away with a will and when someone passes away without a will,
Right.
it's two different types of actions that are filed in general. Testate and intestate. And then there's a process, well, at least in Massachusetts, there's a process that happens if the person doesn't have a will and they want to sell their real estate, or they, the family wants to sell the real estate out of the estate.
In almost every state, the state government has on its website tremendous resources about the state rules. And then I find that in every county, now out in the Massachusetts, do you guys have counties, or what's the government entity more local than the state? Are they counties, or are they close to
Counties? Sure.
counties?
Yeah.
So do
the counties and well, the cities and towns, right? They're pretty sovereign themselves.
But with the probate, the rules vary by county as well, or there's local rules, but there's state law, correct?
Yeah. So once upon a time in Massachusetts, anyway, it depended on what court you were in, what county you were in, right? So the courts go by county. And so it depended on what county you were in as to what form the court required. Massachusetts tried to, and they've standardized the forms. It's the uniform probate code now. It goes across the entire state. Doesn't matter what court you're in. It's all online now. You fill out their forms. You can actually file online as well too. A lot of the stuff has been basically standardized. So the process, the forms, what you have to bring with you into court the day you have to go. Once upon a time, it was a guessing game.
So as far as information, again, I think there's almost all state governments have some resources. Most counties have additional resources. In each state, there's one or two active probate attorneys I seem to find, like you, they have, in your case, 23 videos on probate. I watched a bunch of them. I think they're really good. And so that way you can learn pretty quickly the rules. There's the laws, and then there's the rules and procedures that might vary by locality, but there's the laws can be consistent in the state. And so for any real estate agent who wants to learn, those opportunities are there. So let's talk about the business side of it. How, obviously anybody who approaches you for business should be knowledgeable. I think we just covered, to me, were the fundamentals, learn about the basics. And like we said in the beginning, you're not really just handing out listings all day long. You're a business person. You're trying to build your business, and you're working with people who are going to help you. Do you do estate planning, i.e. avoiding probate? And is that a way that one can work with you on probate referrals, which is by bringing you estate plans? Are you going to turn around and keep me in the list as far as people when you do have probate cases to assign out?
Yes, one section of my practice now is estate planning. When I'm some of my the platforms that I'm on, like Facebook, I am targeting baby boomers, older clients. But I am also on Instagram, and YouTube is kind of a mix, right? So I'm also looking for the millennials and the young couples, and I can estate plan for them as well too. Because I have that tax spin, Massachusetts, I'm not sure about California, but Massachusetts still has an estate tax when you pass away and you have an estate that's over $1 million. So I do planning for that, depending on the person's situation. So yes, the short answer to the question is yes. You can certainly work with me in referring estate planning clients, because once again, it's a service, right? And if it's a young couple, they come to me for an estate plan because they have a young family. Eventually, they're going to buy a house. So they'll come back to me again because they know and trust me.
Right.
And then if I have an older client that's trying to take care of mom and dad, once again, there's usually the biggest asset is the real estate that's involved. So I have to know those things. So it's a real advantage to have the mix.
I think that anybody who wants to get into probate real estate should have a component piece where they make sure every client has an estate plan in place for the client's protection. And then it will reward you with the opportunities to refer estate planning referrals to attorneys like David. And I also advise agents that you should have at least one, if not two resources in that space that you're very comfortable with. Maybe if not in Massachusetts and you don't know any attorney, you can use trustandwill.com as a free kind of low cost entry point, but you really want to supplement or replace that with somebody who you feel gives good value in your locality as well. And so that's a great opportunity, is to call somebody up. And David, if I called you and said, hey, I'm a real estate agent in Massachusetts, increasingly have customers who need estate plans, I'd love to meet with you for a cup of coffee or lunch, my treat, just to meet you so to make referrals. I see your website, I see your YouTube. I just love to meet with you so I make referrals. There's a personal relationship. Would you be interested in that?
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. I'm never closed to meeting with anybody. And sometimes I'll just leave the office and go meet them halfway somewhere and sit for a cup of coffee. I get financial planners approaching me. I get real estate agents approach me. I get loan officers from banks approaching me. I'm not closed to speaking with anybody. And if the relationship works, great. It's one more piece of work that I didn't have, and one more piece of work that person didn't have either. We all stand to gain, so why not?
If on the flip side I said to you, hey, David, I'm a real estate agent. I want to suck your blood. I'm going to take my business card and slit your throat to grab referrals out of your body in blood form. Can I come by and meet with you to do that? How often do you get those phone calls?
I don't because I screen them quickly. But yes, it does happen. And you do get the sense sometimes with people when they call what they're after. And I decide at that point whether it's worth it to spend time with them.
What are things that I could do? I'm not in Boston area, but if I was, what are things I could do that would be of value to you as an attorney? For example, local attorneys here, I order preliminary title reports for them. I get them copies of recorded deeds so they can, see the recording and the history and those kind of details. What are things that I could do as a real estate agent to assist you with your business and make, earn the opportunity to do business with you?
I'm sorry, say again, because you cut out on me at the last minute.
I'm sorry. I'm not, in Boston, so I'm not in a position to solicit you. But if I was, in my market area currently today, things I do for the attorneys I work with is I handle getting documents recorded. I pull up history of recorded documents so they can prepare their pleadings properly. I get preliminary title reports on properties involved, research, what properties somebody might own. What are things that a real estate agent can do for you to create value for you, where they would end up being part of your team that you'd want to do business with them?
Yeah, that definitely would help out. I do have title examiners that are out there, and some of them do have licenses as real estate agents. So yeah, the more you're able to do, the more knowledge you have. Like I say, knowledge is power. The more knowledge you have, absolutely. And the other thing is this: I'm in Massachusetts. I'm a licensed real estate broker. So if I have a sale for a property out in California, I've referred sales out to other states, and there's reciprocity. So it's one of these things where, a referral fee. I am a licensed broker. I'm able to receive a referral fee for a referral of a sale of a piece of property.
Nice.
So that's one other facet that I can do. And likewise, if folks out there have clients or they come across real estate that's in Massachusetts and they refer it this way, they can receive a referral fee as well. So yeah, the more services you provide, absolutely, it makes it more useful from both ends, right? More services I can provide for you, and the more services you can provide for me, it just makes sense.
Look, the first time I talked to first I spoke to David, it was obvious to me that I could talk to him all day long. He's obviously very engaging and very knowledgeable, but this is meant to be participative. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Zoom if you're on live, or raise your hand. I'd love to get your questions. And if you're watching it on the live stream, we've got a bunch of people on YouTube and Facebook. Feel free to ask a question and I will catch it live as best I can, or circle back later. So in Massachusetts, can you act as the attorney and realtor on the same transaction?
So you can, but I don't, because I try to keep it simple. It's hard enough knowing the law and trying to protect the client.
Yeah.
And you have to be really careful with the conflict of interest. And so for that reason, I keep it separate. I usually will have other realtors handle the physical side, as I say, right? Because real estate agents in general are handling the physical aspects of the property. They're showing the property, they're making sure that, if they're listing the property, they have the proper documentation at the time of closing. I can't do any of that, all of that, and then try to represent my client and help them with the contract side, the legal side of things. So it's good to keep it separate. But to answer the question, yes, I can, but do I? No, I don't. Because it's just, it can be too difficult, and then there can always be a question as to where your allegiance lies, whether you're going for your commission or whether you're actually trying to represent the person on the legal side of things.
Right.
So I just stay to the legal side of things and let the real estate agents do their thing on their side.
Got it. When an agent lists a property for an estate in a probate, in California, we have some very specific, we have a listing form and an addendum, as I mentioned also on the purchase side. On the listing side, is there anything specific that you like to see added to a generic listing that protects the estate, protects you, protects the petitioner or executor, administrator, whoever the party is?
Yeah, so in general, Massachusetts, we don't really have a standard form that's attached to a listing when it's coming out of probate. But the very least, what the real estate agent should do is say on the listing that it is subject to all approvals of the probate court prior to the sale. At least that gets us started. And then after the fact, in Massachusetts anyway, we go through a cycle. So it starts with an offer, and then from the offer, if there is a contingency, right? Contingency is that part of the contract that has to be complied with prior to the contract going forward. If there's a contingency for an inspection, then that usually will happen first, or happen next, I should say. And then after that, the seller's team, the seller side will generate a standard form purchase and sale agreement here. So we have two contracts that actually go into place. Once that process starts, it's nice to have the language that says it's subject to the approvals of the probate court. And I do add extra language in there because Massachusetts, when someone files a petition in probate, they have what we call a fiduciary responsibility to the estate. That's a really high level of trust, in other words, a fiduciary responsibility to the estate to get the highest and best price for the property. So that means even if an offer is accepted, you still kind of have to have a kick out clause in there to say that if a higher offer comes in, the estate is bound to accept that higher offer.
Wow.
So that language does have to eventually be inserted into the contract because that protects the client.
Wow. So that's a little different. Is that on every probate sale has that feature where one can, in essence, overbid? And is there a minimum amount that it goes up to trigger that?
No, in general, if the process has just started, and let's say the petition has just been filed and the court has just started to act, then yeah, it had that language should be in every contract that's signed moving forward, whether there's a will or not. In Massachusetts, if there's a will and it's properly drafted, we typically will look for what's called a power of sale. If there's a provision in the will that says that the executor, I'm not sure if you call it executor or personal representative in California, but they're the same, okay? It'll say that the executor or the personal representative has the ability to sell the real estate inside the estate. If that power of sale is contained in the will, then there's no extra steps that are needed in the probate process. If there's no will, or there's a will that doesn't have that language specifically included in it, then there's an extra step called a license that has to be applied for later on. So it's a further delay in the transaction. So you have to have that language, in short, in Massachusetts anyway, you have to have that language inside the contract so that you protect the client, and it allows you extra time if you need to. It's just the speed of the court sometimes, and you don't have any control over it.
So what percentage of of probates in general, maybe not your book, but your best guess, I know you don't do a scientific calculation on this, but if you were to guess, what percentage have the provisions in the will that allow them to sell without any court interference, and which require actual court approval where there's potentially overbids?
Well, so all of the wills do require, when there's real estate involved, the wills do have to be introduced to the court. There's a petition that has to be filed. But in general, it's a smaller percentage, 20-30%, I would say, that actually, if they're an older will, that won't have that language in it, If they're properly drafted, though, the most of the newer wills that I've seen coming through, the ones from the 90s, right? They all have that language that gives the executor or personal representative the ability to sell the real estate. So once that will is allowed by the court and the person is appointed as the executor or the personal representative, they then have the authority to go ahead and sell the real estate. There's no further steps that are necessary to get the authorization to sell it.
So in California, we would have a distinction between full authority, which is what you're describing as the court gives the petitioner, the executive administrator, the authority to sell. They file a notice of proposed action. As long as all the heirs are on board, nothing goes through. But if they don't have full authority, maybe they're not bondable or they're out of state or some other reasons, there's objectors, there's a court approval process where there's a chance for overbid. And that's about 10% of the cases in LA County. As a result of this process, are there investors who specifically look at properties that are coming to court for that process and are stepping into overbid? Is that part of I would think there almost be an industry of people looking at those deals trying to jump the price at some point. Yes?
There are, but typically what I see when you've got someone that's an investor that's trying to jump in on a probate, they're trying to undercut because they have cash. And so they're offering lower with no contingencies in there. And at that point, it's, as I mentioned, the personal representative or the executive's fiduciary responsibility to accept the highest and the best offer. So a lot of times they get overlooked because they're just too low. They're trying to come in and undercut, steal the property, if you will.
Right. Wow. Okay, great. We're going to ask if you do business in Georgia. Are you licensed in any states as an attorney besides Massachusetts?
It's just Massachusetts right now, but I have the ability to refer out because I'm a licensed broker here, refer out sales and whatnot, other business, in other words.
Great. And Lisa's asking about Georgia. I also have a partner who's an agent in Athens, Georgia, where the University of Georgia is. So, and then we have other people to call here. Good. Jumping in. Sharon heads with Georgia and Florida. Very nice. You guys, Georgia and Florida, you guys have a football game every year too. Maybe you should attend that and do some prospecting there. Okay. Anybody have any questions? I like I said, I could talk to them all day long and I'm glad to, but it's meant to be participative. I know that those questions you're thinking of are silly or elementary. That's why we do this call. So feel free to raise your hand, put in the chat box if you're a little more shy about it. And one thing I can tell you is the more you participate in life, the more rewards you get, the more you participate, the more money you make. So feel free if you want to learn more business about real estate, in particular probate, here's a good chance to talk to an expert in Massachusetts. And like I said, I think there's some differences, but there's probably more similarities in our talk. And certainly the principles are similar. And then Sharon says, go dogs. So you're in Georgia and Florida. Okay, good. Okay. So let's talk about what are the biggest mistakes. I'm sure that you have occasions where you have a client who comes to you for a probate matter and they go, well, David, I have my real estate agent. He's the greatest. She's the greatest. We love our agent. Please, we want to use them. And you say, okay, fine. And then you find out, there's a problem and that affects you and affects your client. What are the biggest mistakes you see real estate agents make that come up the works or cause problems for you as an attorney?
Well, I can say I have an example of one now that she just doesn't understand the process. I do have a real estate deal that is going through probate at this point. And one of the biggest problems is the real estate agent doesn't understand the process. And so at the very, very beginning, when I identified that the property was going to need to be probated, 50% of it, another attorney had botched an estate plan in the past. And so I identified it right away and identified the issue in the very, very beginning of the transaction so that we wouldn't get to the 11th hour and then all of a sudden determine we needed to probate. And so the process is actually going along pretty quickly for the probate court because it is a process. And part of the process was service of what we call a citation. And so the agent that's representing the seller in the transaction doesn't work with me too often, and was just calling the office screaming and yelling because there was a citation that was issued by the court that has a return date out in May, and she wanted to close and receive her commission by the end of this month. And I had to explain to her, yes, while I try to push the process along and we can file a lot of things online, there's only so far we can take it. I'm not a judge and I'm not a clerk at the probate court. I don't decide the timeline on when the court wants to act.
Right.
All we do is try to push it as quickly as we can. And this is part of the process. Unfortunately, I said to her, you don't understand the process. And so for that reason, she started to talk to my client, cause problems, cause a lot of stress. My client is already under a lot of stress to begin with. She has a father that has a botched estate plan, mom that had passed away, and we're probating 50% of the estate, mom's estate, and dad's in a nursing home, and she's under a lot of pressure. And so now the real estate agent calls my client and she's screaming and yelling at the client, causing yet more stress on her. So that's just an example of the things that I see when someone's doesn't want to listen, right? It's not so much, okay, you don't understand the process, but if you approach something, I always try to, especially with another attorney, if I'm trying to deal on an issue and I don't quite understand it, I'll say, all right, well, maybe you're right. We'll have to agree to disagree at this point. I'll go back and I'll look at my resources and see what I have. Or I'll say to them, yeah, you know what, maybe I'm green in this area. If you have something you want to send me that will help me understand what it is you're talking about. No. So what she did was she just called the office screaming and yelling. So right away, she's going to get either cut off at the knees, or I'm just going to say to her, look, this is the process. If you're going to do this continuously, then you have to go collect yourself, hang up the phone and go collect yourself and approach me like a professional. Otherwise, I can't talk to you. Yeah. So I guess the long and short of it is I see that there's a lot of misunderstanding as to what's going on in the process and why things take so long, when in actuality, in court terms, it's not really that long. I have cases that have stretched on for years because people are fighting. Okay, this is only a couple of months. And so in the grand scope of things, it's an extension on a closing. But if she actually understood a little bit about the process, she wouldn't be calling, screaming and yelling and causing all kinds of stress.
Well, they teach us that in Real Estate Agent 101, by the way. Yelling and screaming will always solve your problems. And I think he had, number one, you got to be patient in the probate business because things do take time. And number two, you're not in charge. The judge is in charge. I don't know Massachusetts, but the judge can damn near order whatever they want. You
can't tell a judge what to do.
You better not. You better not do. And I see people argue with a judge. It's one thing to respectfully request or suggest, or, but when they start arguing with a judge, I used to go to court every day and I'd sit there and just crack up because you just don't argue with a judge. I can't say why. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying, don't do it. Don't ever argue with a judge. It's just never going to work out for you. Okay. Great question from Linda Session. So she's taken trust attorneys to lunch, doesn't get any business out of it. And I think this is another classic real estate agent mistake. Not saying Linda's guilty of this, but in general, we all are, in that we assume, hey, I called you up, we had a nice conversation, went to lunch, I send you a handwritten thank you card or something afterwards. I'm waiting for that flow of business as a result of one lunch, but it doesn't really work that way, does it?
No, it's give and take, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe the attorney that she went to lunch with was waiting for her to make the first move. You don't know. And the other thing is this, even with networking groups, the idea behind networking groups is to try to establish a relationship with the person beyond just meeting once or twice for lunch or coffee. If you really hit it off and you're really talking and you have a chemistry between you, that helps, of course, but you don't always get that. And so sometimes, it takes more than a few times to communicate with a person to try to make that connection. Networking groups, I don't know if they're a thing of the past. I don't know how good they are now. I always kind of look at it as the audience is a lot more restricted when you're in a networking group, but I've done them. I've done BNI. I've done LATips. I mean, it's might still be a good way to make that connection with an attorney, but it's tough, and likewise, it's tough for me when I'm trying to meet with people to make that connection to start receiving a flow of business from them. Right. So I guess the long and short of it is it's give and take, and you
Right.
that's something you gotta cultivate. You gotta work at it. It's not easy.
My coach tells me relationships are a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that when you break down BNI and LATIP and organizations, there's a million different chapters. The ones that do well, there's a core group who work together, but they're like partners in their business. There's like the real estate attorney, the probate attorney, the divorce attorney, the civil litigator attorney, and they're all referring to each other, but they're all involved in each other's cases. They're all helping each other. Like it's different than nobody shows up week one and gets a bunch of deals, generally speaking. There's exceptions. And there's real estate agents, I think we make that mistake. We expect that it moves that quickly. Okay, Scott Adams, I think you're the first on the call today. So the least I could do is respond to your raised hand. You're unmuted. What's going on?
So I have not really approached probate attorneys, but I've actually done a couple of transactions most recently that were estates regarding dementia and Alzheimer's and people in failing health, where I went into the family, and part of my value proposition to the family, and what I think that I could kind of help out with attorneys too, is, and you can tell me, David, if this would be appropriate for if it's a real value add or if it's just something that I'm creating in my head, as we go in and we front, we go look, we take care of the estate sale. We go evaluate the house. We create the list of deferred maintenance items, any improvements to help it, get top dollar in the market. And then we go in, front the money, go ahead and do the well, everything obviously is laid out. We put together all the contractors, lay everything out, get everything approved by the trustee or power of attorney or whoever's running things, and then go in and execute. And then I just did two, one in South Carolina and one in Atlanta, and I'm about to pick up one in my team, not just me, my team, but it's the same process that we use. Is that a value add? Is that something that, from a real estate attorney perspective, because I haven't sent a probate attorney or an estate planner any business yet, but now that I know that that's the relationship, is that a valid entry for a business relationship?
Yes, it could be. Like I say, the more that you have to offer, the more services that you can provide. Absolutely. I had one just recently, still in Massachusetts, where person was a hoarder. And so we needed someone to come in and clean out. And we had to call around to try to find a service to come in and clean out. So the short answer is sure, absolutely. If you can stage the property, right, and you're able to stage the property and just do the minor cosmetic things that are necessary, help with the clean out.
We ended up doing $70,000 worth of work. But it was, deferred maintenance, interior paint, exterior paint, new floors, new carpets. The clean out was, she was a hoarder, had been there for, 45 years. And the house was 45 years old. She was the original, so it was just.
That's absolutely a good selling point. I don't see anything wrong with that. The only thing I would say is the risk, right? But I guess if you're able to recoup your upfront expenses.
Our ROIs were fine. We didn't, I don't go, if the risk return, the property went from, a $600,000 we had an investor offer prior to doing the work.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And at 600, and then ended up getting 950 for it after $90,000 worth of
that's great
improvements. So.
Yeah, that's definitely a great selling point. Absolutely.
Do you? Well, thank you, Scott. Thanks so much. I don't think we've met before, but thank you for that, and definitely creating value. Some attorneys appreciate that, and some are not going to. David, do you ever work with probate advance companies where companies will advance heirs based on their expected heirship, and they'll advance the money to do some work, or is that something that you have had back experiences with or never worked with before?
I've never worked with a service like that before. No, I've heard of them, but I've never been approached by one.
You have now.
I would have to see the details before I agreed. Yeah.
I run one. So if I actually run my own brokerage, I'm so frustrated. I've worked with so many of them. I just create my own brokerage and I sign up to, and I get them pre-approved and then send them. But we advance a customer maybe $10,000 and they'll pay back 13 or 15 when the distribution might be 6 months, 9 months, a year later. So it's not for everything. It's not cheap money, but it can be effective money sometimes, paying for legal fees and such. Well, great. A question we got on YouTube was, could you repeat the language? What's the language you would put in a contract when you list it when it's a probate case? How do you protect your client because you're going to have some sort of court approval language you had in there? What was the phraseology?
So the language was that it must be, so the contract is going to be subject to all necessary approvals of the probate court. That's just the initial language that you'd put in the offer. And then from there, the attorney would expand on it. Depending on the state that you're in, the attorney would expand on it in order to make sure that. And the other thing I did mention was specifically in Massachusetts, once we get to the point of purchase and sale, the language that I insert into there says that as a result of the fiduciary responsibility of the petitioner, of the person that's being appointed, that if there's a higher offer that is received by the estate, I have to get the specific language for it. I can send it to someone if they want to email me. But in general, if there's a higher offer that comes in, the estate has to be able to accept that offer because they're under the fiduciary responsibility, as far as being a fiduciary, to accept the best and the highest offer that's out there. Or the person that is in charge of the estate could be held personally liable to the estate. Yeah, so the first language that I insert in every offer would be, it's going to be subject to all necessary approvals of the probate court. And then after that, I'm going to insert a longer provision. Once it comes to me, I'm going to insert a longer provision that's going to give the estate that valve to use if it needs to, because there is that responsibility of the fiduciary to accept and receive and accept the highest and best offer.
David, your wealth of information. I knew when I met you on the phone the first time that I would enjoy chatting with you today. We really did some deep dives on probate. Maybe I can have you back sometime and we can talk a little deeper on estate planning. I know it's an important part of your business, and avoiding probate is as important as getting into it. So I really appreciate your time on behalf of everybody on the call today. Thank you so much for taking time out. It's almost 8 o'clock in Boston. So hope we're not taking away from the Celtics playoff game or Bruins playoff game.
Oh, the Celtics tonight. Yeah. So what are you guys doing? You're keeping me away from my Celtics.
Sorry about that. Well, I'm glad to do that.
Celtics, LA.
Fan. I'm glad to do that. Anyhow, thank you so much for your time today. David Ceruolo from Massachusetts. His contact info is in the chat box, ceruolo.com. Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate your time today. And for the rest of you, thank you all for being on the call today, participating, asking questions. This is Probate Weekly. We do it every week. Thursdays, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. We live stream it on YouTube and Facebook. If you want to see the past episodes, go to episodes.probateweekly.com. I'm Bill Gross. I'm at Bill Gross EXP. As always, make today your best day ever. Thank you so much, everybody.